Go News Time, 8:41.
More and more moms have come forward to talk about postpartum depression, that depression that hits after the birth of a child. But there's new research that shows that it's not just moms getting the baby blues these days.
Dr. David Henderson is a psychiatrist and owner of Four Stones Collaborative Group in Dallas. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. When we talk about male postpartum depression, we think of postpartum depression as something hormonal that causes depression. Can this be linked to new dads as well?
It absolutely can. And I think it's important to preface first, if you're listening to this story and you're going, oh, come on, please, postpartum depression in dads, that's ridiculous. Well, that's probably part of the reason why you haven't heard about it, is because men in particular do not want to talk about this. It's very embarrassing and difficult. It's embarrassing to talk about depression in general. And so, getting that conversation started is important. But yes, hormonally, there are actually changes that are taking place. When a baby is born, the male dad, his hormone levels actually drop. So testosterone decreases, and there is definitely a link to low testosterone levels and symptoms of depression. But also, interestingly, listen to this, estrogen levels and prolactin levels, hormones that you don't hear being talked about in men, but that we do actually have, increase. And then the other hormone that's very key as it relates to depression is cortisol. It's the stress hormone response. That increases in men after the birth of their child. And so when you see these shifts taking place, you can definitely have symptoms of depression. And many men, in fact, do struggle with this. In fact, there was a study in the American Journal that showed that 10% of men have postpartum depression symptoms after the birth of their child. And that number actually jumps up to 26% when you look 6 months out after the baby is born. So this is an issue that is not talked about, but that many individuals, many men are experiencing, and we have to address it.
So, doctor, it sounds like this is almost a genetic component of making sure that your father, your male hormones, your aggression is tamped down, that your nurturing and caring goes up. I mean, it almost sounds like it's genetically making you ready to be a dad.
It absolutely is. If you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, what would be the explanation as to why this happens? Well, obviously in the animal kingdom, the male part of the species, he helps to produce the young, but then goes off and leaves. In our culture and in our humanity, we don't do that, obviously, and there may be some reasons hormonally why we stick around, and that could be the explanation for that. It is preparing us. It is getting us ready for being fathers and being connected and engaged, maybe in a little bit different way than the relationship between mother and child, but that connection still needs to exist.
Okay, so what do we do if we're a new dad and we have postpartum depression?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do, and this is the hardest thing, is to talk about it. I was riding up on the elevator with a gentleman in my office building, and he was mentioning how his wife has been very sick through the pregnancy, and he didn't feel like he could complain about some of the things he was feeling in regard to depression, because who am I to complain when my wife is suffering so much? And I think that's the general consensus for men, and that's maybe the message that they've gotten through the culture is, you don't talk about this stuff because, look, your wife is really the one that's suffering. You need to keep quiet and be supportive. That is the worst thing that you can do. You have to talk it through. And honestly, with the hormonal component, there are medical treatments that can be used to help improve a man's mood during those initial phases early on when a child's been born. So talking about is important, maybe seeking out some professional help, but most certainly having people around you who can support you and encourage you in this new role as a dad.
Dr. David Henderson, psychiatrist, owner of Four Stones Collaborative Group in Dallas, on postpartum depression and some of the hormonal changes that men go through following the birth of a child.
Thank you, doctor.